And welcome back to another broadcast of the Talking Archive. My name is Josh Jacobs. Now we're talking again with Ted Ziegenbusch. And last time he was describing his journey at 91X and the success it became throughout Southern California. And of course, as George Harrison said, all things must pass. And we were in the middle of talking about kind of the beginning of the end of Ted being there, because they were just like wanting to stretch him, to quote Devo, which was a popular new wave band back then. You got me jerking back and forth, and that's what was happening. Now, Ted, you said that they wanted you to come back to Morning Drive on 91X because the ratings weren't so good, but you were also doing mornings on, you were doing mornings on the Mighty 690, and you're confused about exactly what they wanted you to do. So let's continue that conversation about what exactly did they want you to do.
Yeah, so I went back and did mornings on 91X, and things, were turning around. The ratings were coming back up because I was a familiar voice, and I guess I had a different style than who had been doing mornings at that time. And it wasn't long after I got back on 91X that the program director of 91X decided to leave. Rich Meyer, Rich Diedemeyer is his real name, but Rich Meyer is his, professional name. And he left to be the program director. I can't remember. He ended up in Chicago at the big FM's WMET.
Oh yeah, mm-hmm.
in Chicago. But I think he had one stop before that. I think he may have gone to Denver first, and then to Chicago for the company that had hired him. But they dumped everything in my plate again on 91X. Suddenly, I was programming both stations. I was programming without the title. I mean, I didn't even ask for the title. They just said, "Hey, Rich is gone. Until we find somebody, can you help us out?" And so I was programming, the Block Party weekends, which they played 3 songs in a row by an artist like Boston or Styx or whoever.
Mm-hmm.
And those were programmed. Those were pre-programmed. That was beginning to be the new thing for radio stations. The program directors and music directors kind of telling the talent, "This is what you're playing." So I had an awful lot to do, and I felt like I wasn't being paid as much as I should for all this stuff. And out of the blue, I called Jim Price over at KGB, that was the general manager, and I said, "Hey, we did pretty well against you guys in the ratings, and I wondered if you'd like to have lunch and talk about it." And he said, "Yeah, what time's good for you?" So I ended up talking to Jim Price, and Jim, had worked with people like Dave McCormick, who was my first program director at KMED.
Mm-hmm.
And we had traveled in a lot of the same circles, and he knew Ron Jacobs and people like that. So when we started comparing notes, he said, "You need to come to work for me." And I said, "Okay, well, I think I've pretty well stretched myself thin, at 91X and 690. I'd kind of like to not have to drive across the border to do my show and to do things. And, Art Linkletter worked here and other famous people at KGB. You're kind of legendary. So what you got in mind?" He said, "I'd like you to be our program director." I said, "Yeah, you've got one. So are you getting rid of him, or let me get you in the door first? Let me get you in here. Let me put you on middays." It's a pretty cushy shift, 9 to 1. Production, because of the union rules, you're not allowed to touch anything except a microphone. So if there's any commercials to do after your shift, it's easy for you. Probably even during your shift on a long song, you can run in there, record what you need to, and the engineers will put it together. So basically, it's show and go.
Wow.
And I said, "Wow." And he said, "And we're union." And I'd never worked union up until that time.
Dang.
And I said, "So what does that mean?" And he said, "Here's what you'll be paid." And I went, what? I'd never seen a figure like that. And I said, I think I can do this. So that's when I went to work. And then I told the people at Noble I was leaving, and they tried to counter, and they even promised to match it dollar for dollar. But I mean, how do you turn down 4 hours a day as opposed to 10 or 12 hours a day? And even though I was giving up the program director, Jim Price said he wanted me to be his new program director. And the only reason that didn't work out was much later, they decided that AM radio was dead, and I pretty much agreed with them, as far as music, and they switched, to a news station on 13, KGB. But Jim Price made sure I was well taken care of. I got a nice, severance pay, and he talked to one of his buddies that was running another FM in town, and I just slid across to doing mornings for KIFM, and became their music director and assistant PD and morning guy. So
what was the format for KIFM?
In those days, they were still doing kind of the KNX FM softer. Wild Mountain Honey by Steve Miller Band.
Oh, yeah.
Followed by, Jennifer Warren's Time of the Night. And it was a very eclectic, they were playing soft Steely Dan album cuts.
Time Out of Mind. And
yeah.
Old
it was
school.
a very interesting format,
Did you know that KNX FM is back online?
Yes,
the mellow
yeah.
I listen to it a lot when I'm driving to Knott's Berry Farm, and I love it.
Interesting. Yeah. So I spent time there until I got a call from Jeff Salgo, that he wanted me to do weekends for him on Magic 106, and I said, Jeff, I didn't send you anything. Where is this coming from? Oh, Ted. I know you from San Bernardino. I mean, you're forgetting I used to be the program director of KFXM. I know your history. I know you were at KGB. And I said, yeah, but he said, come do weekends for me. So I did 2 weekend shifts on Magic 106. It was actually still K-West when I started there. And we slowly, moved to... But long story short, I pick up R&R one day, and on the front page it says Johnny K is the new program director of Kost in Los Angeles, and they're going to these, soft adult contemporary format. And I called up Johnny K and said, hire me. And he said, oh my gosh. Well, I've almost got the whole staff put together. I don't know if I have any spots left, but let me think about it and call you back. And he called me back and said, I found a spot for you, doing weekends. And I said, oh, okay. Well, I'm doing weekends here on Magic 106. And he said, do weekends for me. You'll like it more. And I said, well, why is that? He said, because I think we pay double what Magic 106 pays. And he was right. They did. They paid double per hour. So
that's great. So you were only on Magic 106 two weekends until you got hired by Kost?
No. I was on a long time.
Oh, okay.
I never met China Smith, although, again, I wish I'd have met some of the people, Hudson and Landry, and, different people where our paths crossed. But I was never invited to a staff meeting as the weekender. One time I went into Jeff Saldo on a Sunday afternoon, and I said, Jeff, quick question. He goes, yeah. I said, am I doing okay? He goes, yeah, of course. Why? I said, I never hear anything from you. You're not doing anything wrong. And I was so used to memos, and I did see memos, but so used to memos and staff meetings and things over the years that this was the most unusual job where just come in, do your job, don't worry about a thing, cash the check, and thanks, And so when I told him, I said, Jeff, Johnny K is, starting up something similar over at Kost, and I'm going over there to do weekends because I'll make more money. If I'm going to drive up from San Diego for weekends, it'll help me pay for the gas and everything. Mm-hmm. Okay, I understand, but if I can get something full-time here, will you come back? And I said, well, I'll consider it. but he never did. He never did find it. And by that time, I was I was weekends on Kost from November of '82 until March of '83. Very short time before they gave me the the late night shift, and I just completely moved up to LA from San Diego, and
wow.
The rest is history, as they say. Yeah, and the funny thing is when Johnny K said, I'm taking myself off the air in afternoons, and the late night guy, Brian Simmons, I like his sound. I'm going to move him to afternoons to fill in where I used to be. And don't worry about this. I know nights, you probably haven't done nights since you first started in radio. I said, yeah, I'm a morning guy. I mean, I've done mornings in everywhere I've been. And he said, well, this won't be forever. Don't worry about it. I'll get you on another shift eventually. And over the years, the early years of Kost, I did fill in on everything, including the morning show. Probably did the morning show more than any of the shifts. But it was about 1985. I'm thinking 84, 85 that I was going to leave Kost because, nights kind of gets to you after a while. And I'd been offered some program director jobs in other cities. And I went in and resigned. I told him I was leaving. And he said, wow, you can't leave. And I said, yeah, but, it's been nice. It's been fun. But no, you can't leave. You've got to give us the weekend. Talk to us again on Monday. And I said, okay, all right. And so when I went into Johnny K on Monday, he said, I think you're going to like this. And I said, what? And he said, look at this. And he handed me a full contract, a 2-year contract, guaranteed, the biggest, it was like a 60% increase in the money I was making, and a bonus plan to boot. Because Love Songs had started at that point. We started Love Songs in late '83, I think. And it was doing so well that they didn't want me going anywhere. And so Don Dalton, the general manager, basically said, give him whatever he needs. Don't let him get out of here. And I felt wanted. I felt needed. I felt appreciated. And Liz Kiley and I were both given the same deal. She didn't have a solid contract deal like I had either. And so we both had the meeting at the same time. And when we walked out the door, happy, Liz turned to me smiling and she says, Teddy, we've just bought ourselves a job.
Wow.
And I said, what does that mean? She said, we will be doing this show forever. And I said, we can only hope. So, it was great. There were times I made more money in bonuses on the Love Song show than I made being on the radio in San Bernardino. In just a quarterly bonus for 1 quarter.
Wow.
So I think I made the right choice. And like I said, looking back, no regrets about all the ups and downs and changes. And it was fun. It was educational. I learned a lot. I learned sometimes the hard way, in some of the jobs. But once they took care of me in the mid-'80s at Kost, they couldn't get rid of me after that. So.
Now I remember, and of course, Magic 106 only lasted till late 1985. So you definitely got the better of the two stations there.
Yeah.
Now, how many songs? Because people did request songs. How many of the songs that got played on the Love Songs of the Coast were actual requests, or they just pretty much all pre-programmed, but it made it sound like they were requested?
In the early days, a lot. They programmed very few songs for us. It was ours to choose and ours to go with the listener. And that didn't change for a long time until the ownership of the station changed, which meant consultants changed. And no, Johnny Kaye was, I said he's to this day, he's still the sharpest, most brilliant programmer I've ever worked for. And, he'll be the first to admit he made his mistakes too. And I was there for some of them. I could even mention them, but I won't, And,
that's fine, yeah.
But he was always open to suggestion and always open. He would have an open door policy. If you as an air talent thought something wasn't right or that you guys had suggestions, you were welcome to tell him. And again, I felt really appreciated and really well taken care of. Even after Johnny left originally, and Johnny Chang, his assistant, took over as program director, I was treated incredibly well by Johnny Chang, and he was, he had the best teacher in the business with Johnny Kaye, so he was continued to be successful, and had a nice long run at Kost initially, yeah, and it was fun.
Yeah, and Johnny Kaye after Kost turned KRF 101 around. I mean, right away I could tell the difference because that station had gotten so stale. And when I wasn't sure whether he was going to do it incrementally or just in one fell swoop, just change it. But I loved the changes he made. He brought back the top of the hour timpani roll that was the real stuff instead of that horrible synthesized thing. Went back to KRTH Los Angeles. Then I Hear You Knocking by Dave Edmunds, followed by If You Leave Me Now by Chicago. I'm like, okay, there's been a change to this format. This is really, really cool. Now you got to, have a lot of callers over the years. I remember listening to an air check of yours recently the other night about where people were talking about, celebrations of love, meaning that someone special, people in the middle of marriage struggles, those who found resolutions to those conflicts, and breakups which left people devastated. Tell us about one or two of your most memorable callers that really just touched your heart.
Wow. There's so many. Yeah, I think a lot of the best stories I heard, at appearances from people who would come up and talk to me and tell me that I kept their sanity while their twins were growing up. The mom would say, I sat in their nursery trying to get both of them to go to sleep. My two kids are crying. I'm listening to love songs. I'm crying as a mom. And you got me through that, or you got me through my husband's cancer. When he passed away, I thought everything was lost. And even one of the TV producers that I later worked for, he said, you got me through my divorce when I thought all hope was lost. Nobody could love me. And there was no hope out there. There was no chance of ever finding anybody again. Your soothing voice, your stories, and your phone calls convinced me that there is love, and you can love again, and you can find other people. There were just so many calls over the years of people, and in the early days, and not so much in the later days, but in the early days, we had absolute total control of what got on the air as talent. We weren't given direction as to only make them happy calls or only make them celebration calls, or, we knew we should mix it up. We shouldn't have three mopey sad things in a row on the air. But initially at the 3 commercial breaks, we would come back from the break with a phone call. And we tried we tried to remember that there are people, and we were told this in meetings occasionally, hey, there are people out there who are devastated because they just broke up with somebody. You need to be talking to them. There are people who are celebrating 20 years of marriage and they can't believe how lucky they are. You got to talk to them. And, so we knew we had a little bit of everything out there, and it was kind of a crapshoot. In the early days, before cell phones and cost per minute, before people were paying a dime a minute or even $1 a minute at some point. Back when it was landlines only and people were willing to be on hold forever because it wasn't costing them anything.
Yeah.
We could have the whole phone bank going, and we could go down the line, and we knew initially in the first 30 seconds, whether somebody is worth putting on the air or not. But Liz Kiley and Jan Marie and Lori Sanders and Karen Sharp, all four of the other people who did the first half of the show, all of them, had a compassionate heart, and we didn't hang up on people if they weren't perfect for putting on the air. So we would talk to people, get their story, write down their dedication, and if we didn't put them on the air, we would try to say, Patty called from Costa Mesa, and John, she's sorry things didn't work out. She wishes you all the best. And here's You're No Good from Linda Ronstadt. We didn't do that too often. But we really tried to mix it up. And the tough calls were the ones, where people shared that they had lost somebody. And you had to be really careful. Again, this came from Johnny Kay, who gave us, a lot of freedom. And I give him all the credit for that. He said, just be careful because, once you air something, you'll get a lot of copycats. You'll get people who said, that's just like me. And they'll call and they'll have the same exact story. But they plug in, it's them and their spouse or their, So, just try to keep it mixed up. Don't let it get in the doldrums, completely for very long, and keep the music tempo up. Don't play a lot of slow songs. And, again, people like to give us the credit as the talent for the success of the show when, really it's all about the music, picking the right music. But, again, Johnny gave us the freedom to pick the songs that fit. We had a wide parameter. I mean, you got to keep in mind, for decades, not so much today with the way things have gone, but for decades, we had a complete, huge list of songs that never played during the day, any time ever on Coast, except on love songs, because it fit the occasion. And that's why we had them. And, we just, I thank my lucky stars. I fell into it, as some people would say. I could have left. I could have been a PD somewhere else. It might have been just as much fun. But, I raised my kids. I got, my kids thought Dad didn't have a job because I would be in bed when they'd leave for school in the morning because I didn't get home till 3 o'clock in the morning from the Love Song show. But I was available to go to their concerts in the afternoon or their baseball games or whatever was going on. And they felt like they had a full-time dad because I was working while they were sleeping and I was sleeping while they were at school.
Exactly. And how many kids do you have, by the way?
3 sons.
This is the Talking Archive. My name is Josh Jacobs, and we're talking with Ted Ziegenbusch. And next time we'll ask him, did your kids follow in your footsteps and have a career in radio themselves? Plus, we'll get more stories from the coast.